Hello and welcome to the first session of the Chamber Foundation Sustainability Summit Series, Circularity for a Sustainable and Secure Future. Thanks for joining us. I'm Stephanie Potter, Executive Director of the Chamber Foundation's Sustainability and Circular Economy Program and the moderator of today's session. The sessions in this series are going to go beyond the kind of what and why of sustainability priorities as we know them and explore how to progress these strategies in the new normal that we're heading into beyond the pandemic. We intend for these sessions to inform the frame for our postponed 6th annual Sustainability and Circular Economy Summit, which is tentatively scheduled for spring of 2021 in collaboration with National Geographic Society. Stay with us. At the end of this conversation, we will share the next in the series, all of which will take place on Thursdays in the coming weeks. And so we look forward to having everybody be a part of those as well. And now without further delay, just to introduce our discussion today and get right into it. We're going to be talking about the role of circular materials management and what that role is in achieving sustainability goals and also responding to resource constrained settings. We'll continue the themes that we've been discussing throughout this year, and we will invite panelists to share perspectives on what's needed to design waste out of the system, optimize supply chain engagement, recapture resources, also best-in-class examples and specific priorities and approaches that we can align on in this decade, in this final section. The conversation that we're having today is being recorded and participants are in listen-only mode. We do invite folks to submit questions in the chat box, however, and we will do our best to get to those at the end of the discussion today. So now please join me in welcoming the folks you see on the screen: Jeannie Renee Malone, Vice President of Global Sustainability at VF Corporation; Valerie Craig, Interim Chief Science and Innovation Officer at National Geographic Society; and Paul Clark, General Manager of Cloud Engineering and Supply Chain Sustainability at Microsoft. So without further ado, I will bring panelists in, and what I'd like to do is have us start with kind of a macro question on introducing yourselves and the role of what kind of piece of the circular economy transition you're most directly contributing to, both in your organization, but specifically in your role. And Paul, let's start with you.
Okay, great. First, I want to thank the Chamber for hosting this event and allowing us to explore this topic in detail. My name is Paul Clark, and for Microsoft, I run deployment engineering and supply chain sustainability. My role is to engineer the process that builds out our cloud infrastructure. And specific to sustainability, my team is actually accountable for the disposition of all of the IT assets when they leave our data center. Since I'm part of the Azure Cloud Supply Chain organization, I'm specifically tasked with driving a 55% reduction to Scope 3 emissions over the next several years.
Jeannie, why don't we go next to you?
Sure, thank you. Hi, first of all, thanks to the Chamber for organizing this event. My name is Jeannie Renee Malone. I'm Vice President of Global Sustainability at VF Corporation. And at VF, I lead the global sustainability function, driving the company's environmental sustainability strategy, goals and actions, and sustainability and ESG reporting, covering all aspects of VF's footprint, including direct corporate impacts, supply chain environmental impacts, and impacts on materials and products. And I always like to mention, if you don't know who VF is, maybe this will give you a hint. On a personal note, I wear VF products to enjoy the outdoors. For example, my North Face jacket when I'm hiking, smart wool socks when I'm running, and Vans when I'm attempting to ride my skateboard, which was a little disastrous this summer, I have to admit. And I always like to introduce our sustainability and circularity programs and commitments in the context of our purpose. So our commitment to sustainability is tied to our business purpose to power movements of sustainable and active lifestyles for the betterment of people and our planet. And as a purpose-led company, we have a responsibility to protect the natural environments we all share and explore, and to ensure a sustainable future for the next generation. And from a circular economy perspective, in 2016, we established our sustainability strategy, in which one of the key pillars is focused on circularity, in which we are building opportunities to lead our industry in the transformation from linear to circular, designing our products with the end of life in mind, and keeping products in use. In the circular economy for fashion, apparel, footwear, and accessories are used more, made to be made again, and made from safe, recycled, and renewable inputs.
Great. And last but not least, Valerie, would you go?
Thanks, Stephanie. And Welcome, everybody. So my name is Valerie Craig, and I'm the Interim Chief Science and Innovation Officer at the National Geographic Society. So the Society is a 132-year-old nonprofit arm of the National Geographic brand. And in my role, I oversee grants and programs that have a science, conservation, or innovation focus. In June 2018, we launched our Planet or Plastic program, which was combining the scientific exploration and discovery of National Geographic Society with the illuminating and uncompromising storytelling of National Geographic partners in an effort to reduce the amount of plastic waste that's getting into the ocean every year. So last year, we conducted an expedition on the Ganges River in India to understand the how much, and where plastic moves through the environment on its path out to the ocean. And we're now finalizing the toolkit that will enable others to do this work on rivers around the world, helping to identify the types of solutions that can have the biggest impact and where to implement them. And we're working with explorers around the world to provide tools and opportunities for them to explore and understand how they can address waste in their own communities. So we have quite a broad portfolio, but this work in plastics is where we've really been leaning in on the circular economy for the past couple of years.
Great. Thanks to all of you, and thanks again for your time with us today. We're really looking forward to the conversation. To contextualize it, I would love to start with a whip around kind of our 2030 specific priorities that pertain to circularity, and then we can get into some specifics on tactics and levers around those, and more broadly around organizational pivots in that direction. So Paul, starting with you, Microsoft has arguably committed to one of the most ambitious in the industry. Can you talk a little bit about the commitment for those people that don't know it is around being carbon negative by 2030. So what I wanted to ask you about specifically is if you could talk to the more recent commitment that you all have made as part of that strategy around becoming a zero waste company across all direct operations, and a little bit just to introduce our audience today to that decision.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. Microsoft has been pretty aggressive the past year in some of our commitments, and we do take zero waste and carbon very seriously as a company, right? So our 2030 goal is to become carbon negative, and then by 2050 we plan on removing all of the carbon that Microsoft ever created from the atmosphere. The latest announcement that came out was more specifically our third sprint, and it's about becoming a zero waste company. There are many aspects to becoming a zero waste company, and some of our campuses are already certified as zero waste. The intentionality is to make this part, of our DNA and get that deeply rooted throughout the company. We engage our entire value chain in exploring joint programs to increase reuse, to increase the amount of compost, and to eliminate landfill usage, and then also to extend everything that we're doing for recycling. For example, we're eliminating the use of single-use plastics throughout the company. And that initiative will take care of one element of it. We're also investing in designing packages that are completely reusable. Right? And when we can't reuse it, what we're doing is we're continuing to investigate new polymers that are completely biodegradable and shifting more and more of this waste out of landfills into compostable materials. Our 2030 carbon goal and zero waste goals are reviewed regularly by our leadership team, including Satya Nadella. So it has executive visibility that actually transcends all of the layers of the organization. We're changing our culture to a global scale as every person in every country continues to develop new ideas, new methods, and implement some very creative solutions to help us reach these goals. Solutions like, getting away from cups that we throw away, or, we have the privilege of having some refrigerators in our common kitchens. We're even getting away from soda cans and actually having tanks that supply carbonated beverages so that we can, again, just continue to eliminate that waste in each and every possible way.
All right, cool, that's great. And Jeannie, maybe next to you, because I think this is a good segue. You all have committed, as you sort of just spoke to really being the lead in the industry around commercializing circular business models, specifically through re-commerce and rental initiatives. Can you talk about the 2030 sort of targets in that, just at the broad level, before we dig into the details?
Oh, sure. Did I manage to unmute myself? There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I just want to say it's great to be on this panel with Valerie and Paul. I admire their leadership in this space as well. And it's just really exciting to hear about the initiative. So thanks for that, Paul. So to answer your question, since our founding in 1899, VF has always been a company that prioritizes actions that positively impact people and minimize our impact on the environment, true to the purpose that I mentioned a couple moments ago. And today, VF has truly evolved into a sustainability leader within our industry. We have dozens of significant programs that not only focus on making our own products and operations more sustainable, but also improving the environmental footprint of our third-party suppliers and other business partners around the world. We have a global sustainability responsibility strategy made for change, which represents VF's position on becoming increasingly sustainable. We aren't just willing to accept change, we proactively drive the change the world needs across our own industry and across other industries as well. Our strategy is a robust approach that offers a comprehensive plan to achieving our broader corporate responsibility goals. And the 3 pillars make up our Made for Change strategy include circularity, using our scale for good, and creating movements through our people and our partnerships. And so specific to circularity, in terms of circular economies, linear production is inherently inefficient and wasteful. In a circular business, however, materials and products are kept in use as long as possible. This presents an opportunity for VF to unlock new revenue streams for our brands while continually and meaningfully minimizing our environmental impact. And so in considering circular business models, in 2017, we committed to pursuing circular business models, and we started to rethink the life cycle of our products to limit the impact our business has on the environment while increasing access to consumers who may not have previously considered our products. So I'll just mention a couple of examples. In 2018, The North Face launched VF's first re-commerce platform, The North Face Renewed, which provides the same great quality and performance consumers expect from the brand while being lightly worn. Since its launch, the program has saved more than 37,000 pounds of apparel from going to the landfill and enabling it to be used again in the US by consumers. The North Face also introduced a high-quality camping gear rental pilot in Europe, and Kipling launched a rental pilot named Rent Your Kipling in 2019 to provide high-quality luggage. While these are still early stages for both programs, we see that the indicators are positive. And then one final example is Napapiri, which combined breakthrough technology, cutting-edge design, and sustainability to reinvent the iconic Skidoo jacket. So using just one material, EcoNil, which is EcoNil regenerated nylon, jacket can be recycled and recreated into new products indefinitely without sacrificing fabric quality. So it's made from discarded fishing nets and other materials. So these are just a few examples of what we're looking at to really continue to pursue that circularity goal.
Great, thank you. And then Valerie, this might be a less known fact, but National Geographic, obviously a household name in storytelling, which has long been used to leverage the spread of the importance of conservation and science and sustainability. But behind the scenes, you are also have a really robust arm focused on accelerating science, innovation, and exploration, kind of on the ground and through some of your programs. Can you talk about how they are advancing circularity in their own lanes, and then we can get into kind of what issues you're targeting in particular, or feel free to address that now. I know you've got a big focus in plastics, for example. So over to you with a little color for that.
Sure, thanks. I'll give a little bit of a broad view, I think, because as we said, we're known for our storytelling and for our incredible imagery in particular, but well before we started publishing pictures, we were investing in science and exploration. It's really at the core of what we've been doing for over 130 years, is using that power of science and exploration, education and storytelling to illuminate and protect the wonders of the world. And we're covering in my area a really broad range of topics, so ranging from paleoanthropology, right, the early development of modern humans, to wildlife conservation, landscape and seascape protection, climate science, and also how we can live more sustainably on the planet. But we have a really unique approach in how we advance these topics, in that we support talented individuals that are experts in their fields. So we elevate them and their efforts to achieve greater impact. And when it comes to circularity and sustainability, we've had this effort around reducing plastic waste for the last 2 years. And even in just the last 2 years, we've been able to support over 50 grants in 20 countries. And so, your question up top was about a 2030 vision. And I think looking to the next 10 years, we're thinking broadly about our role as National Geographic in building a more sustainable future and helping to reduce the negative impact that humans have on the planet. We're consuming significantly more resources than the planet can provide at this stage. Whether that's waste or water, energy or food, there's a broad range of topics that we'll be addressing. And when we're thinking about that, we're looking at our own footprint as a company, our operations, the business choices we make, the partners that we choose to work with. But we go further than that to look to our global reach and where we can have impact, and in particular to that big explorer community that we've been building for so long. And we want to continue to identify and empower those individuals around the world that have the ability to engage in their communities, in their regions, with their leadership to advance solutions to the sort of big, hairy problems of the world today.
Awesome, thank you. And let's get into some of the high priority materials. So Jeannie, what are some of the considerations and maybe even challenges in transitioning to circularity in apparel, so specifically with cotton, synthetics, wool, and such fibers? If you could speak a little bit to those specific materials and any others that you're tackling as high priority materials, that would be helpful.
Sure. I'll set the stage by mentioning that after a multi-year effort, in December, we announced industry-leading science-based targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across our entire value chain, consistent with the goal of global efforts to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. And so with that, we took a deep data dive across our value chain to understand our impacts. Primary data was gathered from our 1,400 owned facilities, distribution centers, and global logistics, as well as more than 100 tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers, all which strengthens our ability to identify and implement reduction strategies. And I mention that because what we found is that raw material extraction, processing, and production represents nearly half of our scope 3 emissions, which are 99% of our total enterprise-wide emissions. So it's really important to understand the impacts of materials on our overall impacts. So therefore, fundamental to achieving our science-based targets, we established another bold commitment, which is our new sustainable materials vision. And with that, by 2030, we commit that 100% of our top 9 materials will originate from regenerative, responsibly sourced renewable, or recycled sources. And as one of the largest purchasers of raw materials in our sector, we can use our scale for good to reduce our overall materials impact. So we are switching to using lower impact materials when possible and shifting towards lower impact growing and manufacturing practices. Using life cycle assessments, we identify the areas where we have the greatest potential to reduce the impact of the materials we use, and addressing these impacts across our supply chain not only benefits communities and the environment, but also supports consumers in their own desire to purchase more sustainable products. So just one example here is we're identifying opportunities such as regenerative pilot projects that have the opportunity to scale. And so for example, this fall, Timberland will launch a collection of boots made with leather from a verified regenerative ranch. So this project gives us insight to measurement, best practices, and monitoring of the many benefits to both the environment and the people running those ranches.
Appreciate the sprinkling in of the brands that we're all aware of. Kind of, I think VF is so often forget what's attributed to what. Paul, I think we have sometimes less problems attributing Microsoft to all of its products and services. Could you talk a little bit about the material specific focuses? We got a question in the chat around if you could expand a little bit on what you were mentioning about biodegradable, but also what are you doing in the way of e-waste? Kind of how are you thinking about prioritizing the materials that you have biggest impact on?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, similar to concepts at VF, right? For the cloud in particular, right? We're in a position where we design our own servers, and since we're designing our own product, what we do is we have a lot of influence over what goes into each individual server that comprises the entire cloud. So taking everything all the way back from its raw material form, when you mine iron ore as an example, and you start putting that into server, well, just by increasing the iron to 10% reusable steel in a server, that same carbon footprint of that exact same server drops by 15%. These are the levers that we have. So, it really starts in the tech sector with design for circularity, right? If you can think of that concept at the very beginning and you can sit down and say, okay, I am going to build a product with circularity in mind, you start with a clean slate. You can get past some of the other things that are easy or building blocks that have always been in the industry for a period of time, and it forces you to redesign from the ground up. Right, and that's what we're really doing inside of Microsoft right now. We've embraced design for circularity across our entire cloud. It even extends to the data centers themselves, the physical locations, because we're going to even put forth other commitments in our zero waste initiative around reusing all of the materials like concrete for other developments and other projects throughout the world. And when you embrace this design for circularity, you look past the useful life of any one device. And what you do is you look at the useful life of each component. So what we're designing in the server really goes from the time that you take the material out of the ground until the time you return it back to its natural form. And that natural form could be recycled back into, base ore, if you will, or strip out the individual metals, et cetera. And then there's several steps on the journey. Because even though we have a server today, one of the things that we're doing in my team is we're removing some individual components of servers when they're at their useful life, and we give them to a company in Taiwan that's now recycling them and putting them in children's toys and television sets. There's a very good use of a product that has been in production in the enterprise for, let's say, 5 years, that then lives on in yet another product. In a different area of the supply chain. Our goal of our future server designs will be that, right? As we design a server, we will have a clear mapping from ore to ore and every step in between, so that when we take a server out of the data center, we'll already have predefined distribution channels. And by 2025, we expect to reuse up to 90% of our e-waste through the newly created circular centers that Microsoft announced a couple of months ago, or a month ago. So exciting time.
And before I let you off the hook, if you could, we also got a lot of questions in our pre-survey about metrics and sort of how you go about setting, measuring, and engaging others in some of these targets that we've talked about. So could you talk a little bit about how you're leveraging the sustainability calculator as a tool?
Sure. It's interesting. One of the things that I found, and very similar to what Jeannie was saying around being able to measure this and track this and exert the influence over your supply chain, one of the interesting challenges is Scope 3 is so large. And so much of the cloud footprint is attributed to Scope 3 emissions. The first step is you have to find a way to measure this. Right, and every step in the process, as I was saying, from the time you mine it through the time that you reuse it, continues to attribute to a carbon score. So what my team has gone off and done, we worked across Microsoft and partnered with the Microsoft Dynamics team. We actually created what we call the sustainability calculator. The sustainability calculator, if you will, is an engine that runs on the Dynamics platform, and it ingests all of the data associated with the cloud, down to a particular customer, let's say VF. If VF was running on a particular server, I can pull the exact server that VF happens to be running on, and that would attribute to a carbon score all the way through the stack, everything that transposes on the network from somebody's keyboard at home all the way to the server and back, and we're expanding that to do that within the applications. So VF could log into this tool as an example, or any company, and they would be able to model out their carbon footprint for Scope 3 as it relates to the cloud. And we hope to future expand that where they'll be able to model their entire carbon footprint, uploading different data from different parts of their business. What's unique about it is we also give everybody the opportunity to show what's the difference running on an on-premise solution in your own company versus a cloud solution. Because at cloud, and this is across all cloud providers, not just Microsoft, right? The cloud is built for scale. So there's a lot more investments, from a cloud provider on renewable energy or better cooling, all these different technologies that are out there, because at scale, you can make different investments to make it a lot more green and green friendly. And I think you'll see in the coming months some other announcements that Microsoft will make, not only about the calculator, but our cloud footprint that will further solidify our commitment to a lot of these goals.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and so good segue, Paul, because we're talking a lot about kind of how you influence an extended network, be it supply chain or other kind of stakeholders. Let's go maybe Valerie to you, just because I think it's a little bit of a different take. How do you identify and empower the impact makers that you work with? How do you evaluate grantees, and how do you sort of have the brand represented in the diverse set of folks that you touch through all of your work?
So we have, as I said a couple of times, we have a pretty broad network of explorers, and we've been doing this work for a long time. So we are actively recruiting around the world, and we do that a few different ways. We have an international team that is small but mighty, and they have built networks in different regions of the world, but also our Explorer network itself is incredibly powerful. And that network, of course, reaches across so many different disciplines, and because we have such a long history, they're also at different levels of their career, and so can really provide us with access to new innovators. Our grants process is incredibly competitive and robust, and even for a small grant, we're looking at multiple rounds of review. So it's definitely a very thorough process, both in terms of, who's the individual and the work that they're doing, and importantly, who are they working with? So we care a lot about working with communities and not sort of doing this so-called parachute science where you're just coming from North America and dropping into a country around the world. We really want to identify people in the places where they're working to elevate and build the networks, again, to have those networks themselves be much more robust and grounded in place. And then once an individual gets a grant, they join that network of explorers. And we curate a pretty robust set of offerings for that network and for individual explorers that are tailored to different levels. So we have, for example, an early career leadership program. So if you come in through an early career grant, you're eligible to apply for that. And it's really a hearty multi-day program that we get people together, now virtually, but we can get people together to connect with each other and to take leadership training classes. To think about how they're going to be able to elevate their work and be more effective spokespeople and engaging with those that have the power of the pen and can make change happen. And then further on, we do storytelling trainings. As you would imagine, it's important for scientists, I think, don't often have the best reputation as being able to be great communicators, but we are changing that one scientist at a time and making sure that they're well able to communicate the great work that they're doing. With this issue of plastics, that's been really important, because being able to create an innovative solution that works is amazing, but it's not going to go anywhere if you can't talk about it and you can't connect with people and you can't get it implemented. And once it is implemented and working, how do we make sure it's not a solution that's only isolated to one part of the world if there's an opportunity for it to work more broadly? So that's a big part of it too, is bringing our explorers together to collaborate, to work with each other, to think about how we can get different areas of expertise to come together to think about problems a little bit differently. And then beyond that, we're also looking at other ways to accelerate innovation. So we did our first ever innovation challenge last year for plastics. That was incredibly successful. If we have time, I'll happily talk about the winners from a couple of those tracks later.
Great. And Jeannie, you've talked a little bit about kind of influencing all of the folks that you work with. Could you speak a little bit to how your products and their sustainable stories have kind of gained consumers' trust and maybe even inspired action in sort of a ripple effect way like that, which Valerie was describing in terms of the work through explorers? How are you guys seeing that become sticky for your users of your products, as well as the supply chain that you work with? Oh, Jeannie, you're muted. And
I muted myself again. Sorry about that. Okay, so I have a couple of examples. We like to think that consumers can make a statement about their own brand by the products that they wear. So kind of a free to be kind of thinking about your own style and expression. And so, for example, we're seeing some of this come out of the COVID response. And for example, we have a Vans Foot the Bill initiative, which aims to assist the creative communities of our extended Vans family around the world. And so the proceeds from the Foot the Bill support local and community-driven skate shops, restaurants, art galleries, and music venues. And over the past 2 months, this initiative has helped to contribute approximately $4 million for small businesses impacted by COVID-19. So that's a direct way that consumers can use their purchasing power to really support some of the initiatives that they care about. And then another, it's related to this question I saw it pop up in the Q&A around how to promote circularity products. And I just wanted to mention that standards and certifications play a role in consumer confidence. And so, for example, Napa Puri's Circular series, which I mentioned earlier, is the fully recyclable jackets, has recently been recognized with the prestigious Cradle to Cradle Certified Gold certification, which is the world's most advanced standard for safe, circular, and responsible materials and products. So we're seeing, sort of an increased interest from consumers on recognizing those types of labels and standards and certifications, and how that plays a role in consumer confidence.
Great. So we're getting to some of this already, and you are making my job very easy because you're fielding questions that are coming in without me even having to aggregate them. So thank you. But we will get to some of those that you all have. So we will track toward that soon. I did want to kind of talk a little bit about kind of use of available technologies. I have a couple of questions with respect to, kind of, are you looking at a difference across different material types in terms of what is useful and what can be leveraged, and any bright spots that you've seen in the way of some of these pivots you're talking about in terms of using technology. And so, I think anyone can kind of answer that question. So whoever's got a good one, feel free to jump in. I think we're comfortable enough at this point that you're not going to overspeak each other. So please.
Since I don't get much into the material side, I'll jump in with one of the ones that, so as I mentioned, we had this innovation challenge, and one of the tracks that we had was on materials design. And I was really excited to see that the winner is a startup company called Corso, and they have a paper technology that seemed really basic, but is quite revolutionary when it comes to packaging. It's 100% biodegradable, edible, and transparent, and it's a coating. So if you can think of all of the products that we use that have plastic now, so imagine wrapping for a sandwich, right? That's always going to be a thin plastic, or a liner for a paper cup so that your hot beverage doesn't cause a problem with your hands. And this is a paper product that can essentially replace the plastic in all of those kinds of applications. And what I think is really incredible is they were thoughtful about not wanting to completely redesign the manufacturing process. And so they were able to produce this material on existing equipment in places that are producing the less circular product. So it's incredibly both cost effective, but also immediately able to implement. And I think we're seeing that across a number of factors. I might throw to Jeannie just because I'm also really fascinated with all of the changes that are happening in the fashion industry and with materials design and clothing, and small things that I've learned recently about, even your 100% cotton t-shirt that has a polypro thread that you never knew about. So anyway, I think there's a lot of opportunity.
All right, well, Jeannie, the mic has been passed.
Sure. Well, I've talked about a couple of these different examples, but just a couple other from our VF brands. In 2019, Christopher Rayburn, who's a famous designer, embodied the North Face outdoor spirit, we like to say, by unleashing a limited edition tote bag that was made out of old North Face tents. So tents that can no longer be repaired or replaced have been carefully deconstructed and then intelligently remade into a new item. So each individual bag is entirely unique depending on which part of the tent has been used. I think that's such a great example of, unleashing innovation and self-expression, as well as really reusing those products and materials. And then I already mentioned the Napa Puri 100% recyclable jacket. But I'll just mention that again because it's such a great example of the brand's mission to design a circular future for fashion, and has since unleashed a entire circular series. And so just as a reminder, you know, the main material innovation is this mono material composition. The filling and trims are made from nylon 6, and the fabric is made from regenerated nylon, which is a high-performing nylon 6 yarn. And that's recycled from discarded fishing nets and other waste materials. And then again, that connects us back to nature and the environment, which is a key core to our business as well.
Great. Paul, anything to add on technologies, how you leverage them and across what kinds of initiatives?
Yeah, thank you.
Feels funny asking that of a tech company, but please go for it.
Okay, sorry. You know, I do. I think that one of the things, especially for enterprises, right? I think consumer products are much further along than enterprises in some of this journey because they've been around for so long. In the enterprise space, one of the first things that we have to recognize is some of the technology that we need doesn't even exist today. Even for Microsoft, right? To get to our carbon negative goal by 2030, we readily admit that some of the technologies aren't even there. But we know we're going to get there, right? We've been pretty aggressive. We've established this $1 billion fund to really enlist partners to come with us on the journey, because it's going to be this deep collaboration that takes place across your supply chain or your value chain that's going to lead to some new initiatives that are going to come out with the desire for new products that, you know, are biodegradable, et cetera. I mentioned earlier about biodegradable, you know, recyclable products in the server space, right? And we're working with several partners that are off doing that, but we're doing that in partnership. It's not just Microsoft that could come up with that, because, you know, when you're a plastics manufacturer, you understand so much more about the plastic, let's say, than Microsoft does, you know, from a technology standpoint. So it's really bringing all of these thoughts and ideas together through joint collaboration up and down the value chain. That's really going to lead to a lot more of these innovations. At the enterprise level, again, I think those are very few today, but I think you see a lot of the enterprises investing heavily that will quickly be able to catch up to things like consumer food packaging, et cetera, in the very near short term, largely due to the investments Microsoft, Google, Cisco, you know, a lot of major companies have been making.
No, I love that distinction, because I think we're operating at several levels across the folks on this discussion. So I think that's really nice to put the perspective together.
It's similar to the journey with Scope 3 emissions, right? For many years, we've gotten very good at Scope 1 and Scope 2. And that's what everybody had really put in front of them. So we have a lot of invention around, you know, inventions that have come out with reusable energy, right? Electric cars, right? Electric vehicles, all of these things that are more attributed to Scope 1 and Scope 2, right? Power consuming, you know, fuels, et cetera. The next big challenge that we all face is going to be Scope 3. And Scope 3 is going to be, you know, laden with invention-rich opportunities. And new, you know, somebody on the panel had already said it, new revenue streams for companies that are willing to jump and take that initiative to drive Scope 3 and really use circular products.
Great, thank you. And just a question on kind of on the back of that about levers that can help with this. Valerie, you've talked a little bit about storytelling and how you're trying to empower some of your explorers to be kind of the mouthpiece for you and why that matters. Could we talk a little bit about, if anyone's got perspective on other levers, or, you know, Valerie, if you want to expand on sort of why storytelling matters. But yeah, I'd love to hear kind of Paul and Jeannie as well, kind of other levers that you think are really important to be leaning into to make these things happen. So that was confusing, but maybe we'll start with Valerie, and then Jeannie and Paul, if you have anything to add, then we'll go that way.
Yeah, I think the power of effective storytelling is just growing and growing and growing. At this point, I think our brand is known first for incredible photography, and a really arresting image can just cut right through the noise of a complicated issue. I'm a prop. So this was the issue of our June magazine in 2018, and the visual of an iceberg plastic bag, actually some people said it took them a while to see the plastic bag of the iceberg, just immediately is a stopping moment of the scale of the problem is so much bigger than what we're seeing. And it just takes this very complicated topic and boils it down very quickly. And I think where we've been able to be really effective too is in focusing on solution-based storytelling. So we don't want to run around screaming that the sky is falling. We want to be sure to not, I think, not underplay the severity of the challenges that we're facing, but to also be clear where there's opportunity for solving those challenges. So the storytelling that we do through the magazine and the channel can be really powerful, but then I think where the society and my part of the organization comes in is taking some of those stories and leveraging them. So in the case of this magazine, you know, it was really exciting to see at World Environment Day that came right on the heels of the publication of the magazine. Delhi led World Environment Day in 2018 around the issue of plastics. And we were seeing ministers in India holding up the magazine while they were making new commitments to tackle plastic waste, which was amazing. And, you know, we launched an exhibit at the UN during the UN General Assembly, and it was the same moment for the UN to, you know, to put out their folks to say, but we've been doing all this great work to make our headquarters more sustainable. So it can be really great storytelling can form itself as a rallying cry for people to attach to and to be able to want to elevate their own positive actions, which then helps create a momentum for more action. So there's just a really good opportunity to leverage the images and the stories that resonate.
Yeah, and Paul, I might thank you, Valerie. I appreciate you speaking to storytelling because I think it applies across every group that everyone's touching on this call. But Paul, I wanted to actually add a layer to before you respond with anything that you had in mind. I wanted to also flag that you know, purchasers was mentioned in one of the questions, and how can they be a lever in encouraging more circularity in the cloud as far as what they're asking for. So I don't mean to take your, if you formulate thoughts, please share them, but I did want to also kind of point you in the direction of that question as well, since it's relevant.
Yeah, so great, right? I do agree with the storytelling. It's a complex situation that we're trying to solve, right? And there are so many varying opinions that it's hard to grok what the right path is. Right, and the right path could be different for different industries. So being able to land these stories and share examples, like we're taking parts out of a server and using it for televisions, or the plastic bag, and it's so cool when you see somebody using your product, you know, that's on the news. You know, in terms of the cover of that material, right? It resonates, it sticks. You know, you need to find the right analogies, and you need to come up with the story that ties it back to why it's important to the individual. So I'll leave that, but I'll get to the other part of your question right now. Am I seeing, you know, purchasers ask for more circularity or greener initiatives? Most definitely, yes. We see that across the board as a cloud provider. Everybody's asking about our green footprint, what are our sustainability actions? So we see that from the customer who buys cloud services. Me as a purchaser, I see that of all of the suppliers that I'm asking or I'm interfacing with, right? For example, Cisco is very progressive on buyback programs for devices, right? They want the device back, similar to Apple and other companies. So we look for that. And at Microsoft, we've also started putting sustainability clauses in all of our contracts with suppliers. We want to understand the data. We want to understand their journey. And we're doing the same for, you know, purchases of our services. So, you know, you have that throughout the value chain, where what I want to see is I want to see everybody else's data. I want to see their commitment to going green. And then as a corporate purchaser of I buy server components, as an example, I have a lot of influence on how I spend my money. And I think where this starts, and going back to stories and trying to bring this full circle, as a consumer of any product, you have a choice. And I think what you will see across the industry, related to an earlier question, is I think products will start coming out with green scores. My ice cream is greener than yours, right? My jacket, you know, is greener than yours, right? And we're going to see eventually all industries come together, recognize the way that the metrics are managed and calculated that attribute to a score. right? And I don't know if 97 will be better or worse than 102, right? But products will start having scores similar to the way that we have that GMO insignia on certain packages that we go off and buy, right? Or how this is naturally sourced, et cetera. Because the consumer, the end user, is really the person in the position that can help influence that, as well as the manufacturer. And we have to get the manufacturers on board because they're going to have to step away in the short term for potentially a little more profit when they think about sustainability. But in return, what they're going to do is they're going to open up many, many more markets and revenue streams because they're going to embrace circularity.
Yeah. Jeannie, any other kind of levers that you see as useful or that VF is using? And then I do want to turn from there to kind of the look ahead and close us out with some perspective as to what we're heading into and how we can really make the best of the circumstances we're in. But Jeannie, to you first for anything additional to that set of levers.
Yeah, I just wanted to build a little bit on the storytelling lever and then talk quickly about two other levers as well. But I completely agree with Paul and Valerie that this is a complex issue. We're trying to tell a story about very complex matters, greenhouse gas emissions. It's a hard concept to understand. But when you can put it into a visual, like Valerie, the picture you just showed, which I remember that one very clearly, or have some sort of calculator, Paul, that you're talking about it. That really helps to translate what we're trying to do into meaningful and I think, I guess, digestible ways. We've done some work putting videos together that really show the bottle recycling plants that then and how we use those materials that can go into our products and then be worn as a new jacket. And so it's really interesting to think about how to tell stories through videos and images, and I think that's such an important communication lever. And then I just want to mention a couple other levers that are important, and Paul talked about this from the financial perspective. We're seeing an increased interest from a number of stakeholders. Consumers we've talked about quite a bit, but also investors and governments. And so, for example, from the investor perspective, in February, we issued a successful 500 million euro green bond, which was the first in the apparel and footwear industry. And this is exciting because attaching sustainability metrics to a financial transaction in a successful way truly demonstrates the increasing interest in sustainability from the investor perspective. And that's moving dollars towards sustainability investments. That's truly exciting. And investors are paying attention to this from the comprehensive environmental, social governance, ESG perspective. And just to give a pat on our back, coming out of COVID, or I guess we're still in COVID, but for our response to COVID has been very much a people first response. And in Barron's recently published a new list of the 100 most sustainable companies with a heightened focus on social factors. And VF came in with an original ESG ranking of number 21 in February and a new social metric ranking of number 1 in the new report. And so that shows that investors are paying attention to companies not only looking at environmental issues and initiatives and benefits, but also the people aspect of it. And so those two go hand in hand, and we're always looking at the interconnection between people and planet. And then finally, the last lever I'll mention is just policy, advocacy, and government. And just in this regard, governments around the globe are considering policies to build back better or a climate resilient recovery. And so what we're doing around this is engaging with lawmakers to let them know that these policies can help advance our goals and strategies, and that also have positive outcomes such as job creation that align with our purpose. And we know that if we are to truly achieve our goals, our ambitious goals that we've set forward, not only do we need cross-industry collaboration, such as Paul was describing earlier, but really policies and regulations that will move us in that direction.
Great, thanks. And since you so cleanly segued to it, we've had conversations one-on-one. Most of you have shared with your posture that sort of the pandemic is likely going to result in an acceleration toward goals and not away from them amidst the pandemic and beyond it. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your opinions with respect to how the pandemic is going to change the way we do business in the future and what sort of the next big steps we can take as a society are, specifically with respect to all of the folks that we've got listening today who can contribute greatly to this in the next phase. But any sort of macro thoughts on where we're headed and how you see this as something that we can kind of jump off from and accelerate some of the things we've been talking about? That's one to grab. This is whoever has a thought on it can grab it.
Sure, I have a thought on everything. You know, the pandemic, to me, has really brought home the seriousness of the situation. That's where I'd go back and say, I believe that if we do not address greenhouse gases now, the pandemic is really going to look like a sneeze in comparison. You know, and I think that we had a pause for a little bit of time, right? People were trying to adjust to work from home, but we saw a lot of good that came out of this. So for me, the pandemic is really a rallying cry. It's uniting us in many ways, right? What's also really cool is that the conversation continues despite the pandemic. I've seen more and more of these conversations happening, right? Where even though conferences are being canceled, or you know, some of the venues where this wasn't talked about, I've seen more pop up. This conference itself is an example and a testament to the need and desire to bring about change in this space, right? I believe that those who can see carbon reduction as their mission are only, you know, more motivated as a result of the pandemic, not less motivated. I also think that many companies have now seen that employees can be productive working remotely. And I think that some form of remote work will stay with us. And that too will bring down our carbon emissions on a global scale. So there's been a lot of good that's come from this, right? But I really do think that it's a wake-up call to say, yes, the pandemic is affecting this. What if we don't address greenhouse gas emissions? I think even Bill Gates, you know, came out the other day and talked about this very topic, right? Ironically, you know, former Microsoft, but you know, came out and talked about this topic. And I think that's what you're going to start seeing playing out. It's really an acceleration. And as we go into next year, even Ellen MacArthur and a lot of these other groups, right, it's just an acceleration of how we need to start taking this more and more seriously.
I'd love to piggyback actually on both of those.
Yep.
I'm really glad that you started with climate. I think, you know, I've had a lot of plastics conversations in the last 2 years, and you can talk about all these great things that are happening and we're making a lot of progress, but fundamentally we aren't going to really revolutionize the way forward until we address carbon pricing and we look at it from a climate perspective, because the raw materials, virgin materials, are just way cheaper than trying to use recycled or recovered material. And so until we get pricing right, which means starting with climate, then we won't see a big shift. So I really am encouraged that the attention is not going away, and we are continuing to have these conversations. It's nice, Paul, to hear that you're also encouraged with that. And I think from where we sit with this, supporting a network of people around the world who travel a lot and who have a particular model for how they do their work, it's been really satisfying to watch people in whatever context, whether it's wildlife conservation or materials design, thinking about their own communities and how to localize their work. And, you know, Joel Sartori is one of our best known wildlife photographers. He's been documenting species in zoos around the world. He can't travel right now, so he's out documenting the insects and wildlife in his backyard across Nebraska. And learning a lot and sharing what he's learning. So I think looking a little closer to home and solving some problems a little closer to home and doing that at a global scale is just really exciting.
Awesome. Jeannie, anything to mention? There was also, by the way, some questions around how consumers can be involved in their own repairability and things like that, but I don't mean to throw you off course. I'd love to have your answer to that question, and then if you could field a little bit what you're doing with respect to consumers being able to manage their own repairability of their products. If you're doing anything in that line, that'd be helpful to hear too before we close out.
Sure. Sorry, I haven't been watching the chat as I have been, as I should have been, but just to build on,
that's my job.
Valerie and Paul, I think it's you know, the focus on climate is just critical. And I don't know anyone that has truly enjoyed 2020 to a 100% degree. I think it's really opened up a lot of eyes to understand that this truly is the decade of action we are facing, and we need to take action now. And I really admire the work that Paul, that Microsoft has done around carbon pricing. Valerie, to your point, and you know, there's just so much that needs to be done to really bring it all together from a financial and a sustainability perspective. But just to bring it back to consumers, I think emerging from COVID presents a real clear need and opportunity to engage with consumers. And I have a couple of statistics here that our research team has found is that 67% of Gen Z and millennials indicate they've already changed their purchasing habits due to climate change. So that's pretty interesting. And our consumer insights team has also found that by 2027, millennials and Gen Z will account for over 2/3 of apparel and footwear revenue in the US. So that shows that we need to do more around our traceability efforts to make sure our consumers understand where our products are coming from, how they're made, who's making them, and really to connect with them from a sustainability and circularity perspective. And then you had also asked, what's the next big step that we need to take as a society? And we really believe that sustainability starts at the ideation stage. And I would encourage everyone to think about the products and life at the earliest part of the process. That's how we really think about, designing for circularity, designing for end of life. So let me go look here at the chat.
The question, I'll just give it to you again, was around, is there any mechanisms for consumers to be repairing their own products as far as what you're thinking about as a next step, or if you've got that already or you've seen that done? That was the question, if you have a quick response to that one.
Sure. So, we have a number of our brands have take back programs. And so there's, if you're looking to repair your own product, I encourage you to look at different brands' websites, have all sorts of different interactive activities for how to spend your time while you're at home. And so there's a lot of interesting anecdotes and advice and suggestions on all sorts of topics there.
Great, thank you. I'd love to end with a quick whip around before I turn to the promises for what we'll do with all of this great engagement we've had so far and where we are heading next. But before I do that, we have 3 minutes left. I'd like to spend 90 seconds on this last whip around, which is basically, what are you most optimistic about as we sort of transition into the next kind of 9+ years of this critical decade? So what kind of gets you excited? If you have one thing in mind, we'd love to hear it. Maybe Paul, will start with you, Valerie, and then Jeannie, and then I'll close this out.
For me, I see kids talking about carbon and waste. I never saw that before, right? I think this is very promising, especially where a lot of the technologies don't exist, right? As a society, we're tasked with an impossible task right now. But even, the kids talking about it, we'll figure it out if people can talk about it. So I'm really optimistic that kids are even asking about waste. They're asking about carbon. I hadn't seen that before until the pandemic hit.
Valerie?
2 quick things. One is the power of voice, and seeing more and more people recognizing the power of speaking and making their priorities known and coming together to elevate those as a group. And then also aligned with what Paul was saying, youth, and that the youth of today are a whole new force. And whether it's innovating at a scale that we never imagined possible, or again, really coming together as a generation around these issues that are so important, and getting older leaders to actually pay attention and take action. I find that wildly inspiring and giving me hope for getting my kids to be part of that active generation.
That's wonderful. I feel exactly the same. And I'll just add that, we're in such a complex time from both a social and an environmental perspective. And I think that I'm optimistic about a transition to more empathy, more respect for one another and for the environment. From a VF perspective, as the owner of many iconic outdoor brands, I'm optimistic about people wanting to spend more time outside and really enjoying the environment that we have around us, and that there's a deeper commitment to sustainability and expectations that companies like ours are responsible and taking action towards the betterment of people and the planet.
Great. With that, I just want to thank you all again for all these contributions. This will be a recorded conversation, so if anyone came in or out late or early, we'll get that back to everyone. And as far as the great questions, not all of which we can field, we are using these conversations as input into our next set of programming. So we will take and look through all of the input and the questions and the sort of priority areas that you all have offered up. and make sure that when we come back together for this topic, we will kind of circle back and use those as our starting place. So, you know, heading into 2021, we do intend to have this program be a bridge toward what we talk about in our annual conference, and this is all very helpful. You all, the three of you getting us started, and all of you online with where your heads are at. If you do have additional questions about anything covered today or otherwise, you can feel free to reach out to me directly, spotter@uschamber.com. And we do hope you'll join us for the next in our series. So we will be talking about climate efforts next in the week of September, or well, the last week of August, first week of September, and then collaborating for impact, and then finally sustainability impact, investment and reporting during Climate Week, the week of the 21st, all on Thursdays, all around this time frame. And the website below will give you up-to-date information about how to register, and you'll hear from us on that as well. So with that, just want to thank everybody again for their time, and for our panelists for their contributions. We will be back in touch working with GreenBiz as a partner to kind of make sure the conversation is consistent across all of those of us working in circular kind of priorities, and we'd really welcome any additional feedback outside of this call. So with that, I wanted to thank you again, and just enjoy the rest of your afternoon and your week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.